brain actually doesn't know the difference between the real-life experience and what you're imagining. The research on mental rehearsal shows that the brain will look like in time that it's already had the experience and it's vacant of the experience. Now, keep firing and wiring those circuits and you're going to begin to behave that way. So now you're installing circuitry now to use in your life to get your behaviors to match your intentions. If you said, how would it feel to feel worthy of love? How would it feel to be grateful for life? How would it feel to be worthy of abundance? And you said, I'm going to teach my body emotionally what this feels like before the manifestation of the event. You're not waiting for your life to change to feel worthy. You're actually changing your life by becoming worthy. You're generating abundance. You're generating love. You're creating an elevated emotion. Now, our data is so compelling because when you truly begin to elevate your emotional state, you could really lock in, to those elevated emotions. Your body is so objective that it actually believes that it's living in a whole new environment before the environment changes. In other words, the body's believing it's in that new future. And if the environment signals the gene, and it does, and the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion, you're actually signaling genes ahead of the environment, and your body will begin to become conditioned to a new mind. Now think about this. If you did that every day, the word meditation literally means become familiar with. You become familiar with your old self, you become familiar with your new self, and you say, I'm not getting up until I feel this feeling. And then you'd say, I want to be able to bring this feeling up whenever I want. I'm going to keep remembering this feeling over and over again. It only takes a thought and a feeling, an image of the future and emotion, a stimulus and response. You can condition your body to believe it's living in a whole new life. And when you feel the emotions of your future, something amazing happens. You're no longer in lack or separation, so you're no longer looking for the event to take away that feeling of lack or separation. Your body's actually believing it's in the event. And so then you're not looking for it, you feel like it's already happened. Get ready, because that's when your life begins to change. And so we've discovered that if you're actually practicing this and you immersed yourself in that experience fully for 7 days, the amount of metabolic and biological changes that will take place in your body will be so significant that your body will actually believe it's living in that future. And yet, most of the people that come to our workshops are literally in a ballroom. There's nothing really exciting happening in the environment, but their body's believing they're living in a whole new life. And so one thought leads to a choice, which leads to a behavior, which creates an experience that produces an emotion. So then new information, new knowledge begins to cause you to think differently. If you can remember that knowledge and begin to make a different choice because you want to experience the truth of that information, you'll have to behave differently. And when the experience occurs and you feel the feeling of your abundance or wealth, I guarantee you're going to continue wanting to make the process of change something consistent in your life. And sometimes there are threats and dangers where that primitive nervous system actually works in our favor, and that's the emergency system. But you got to also realize that you only have a certain amount of energy. And if you're living in emergency mode for an extended period of time, there's no energy for growth and repair, there's no energy for long-term building projects. And so when it's needed, and you have to outrun the predator, you go. Yeah. You don't sit and try to make friends with the predator. We're not that good. You run, right? The problem is if you keep that alarm system switched on all the time, it gets very addictive. I've looked at people's brain scans and watched their brain get worse in the early days and tap them on the head and say, what were you doing in there? 100% of the time, they were analyzing the problems in their life within that disturbing emotion. And if an emotion is a record of the past and they can't think greater than how they feel, they're thinking in the past, there's no solution there. Cross the river, get beyond the emotion, and you'll see possibility because you're no longer in the box of that emotional state. Now, that's so much easier said than done because you're going against thousands of years of programming of living in survival. I mean, 200 years ago, it wasn't easy being human. I mean, we're in survival all the time. I mean, famine, every disease. I mean, it was hard to be human. And so we have to lay down the very thing we used our whole life to get what we want for something greater to occur, and it goes against thousands of years of programming. It's not something that you get good at doing once. You got to keep practicing. So you really have two ways to look at it. If you're living in stress and you're living in survival, and that system is switched on, then everything will be a threat. Everything will be a danger. Everything will be a reason to rush, to be impatient, to be frustrated, to be judgmental, because that's the consciousness, that's the emotion we're living by. So now you have a problem with a coworker, you have a problem with your partner, whatever it is that you use as an example, and you have to give a presentation. Now you really have one of two choices. Either be victimized by those conditions in your life and you stay in that emotional state, and anything that controls the way I feel and the way I think, I'm victim to, right? Okay. Or I actually can be a creator now. Okay. So when it's the hardest, it matters the most. Okay. So there's going to be a story, a valid story that's going to go along with those emotions that you're going to have to give up, that you can address at another time from a different state. If you're altered in that state and you say something, you do something, you write the email, you send the text, you'll always regret it. You'll always say, I should have never said that. I should have never done that. We got to learn that we're in an altered state at that time. So there's only one of two choices. You either stay there the whole day and tell everybody that story, or you say, okay, let me take a moment. Remember that this is the experiment called life. Okay, let me practice getting relaxed in my heart. Let me slow the animal down. Let me practice. I'll take a few minutes. Now, let me breathe. Let me get my state back. Let me change everything. Okay, let me remember who I am, who I want to be when I open my eyes, and let me practice that again. Now, even if you had to do that 10 times in one day, I would say it was a day worth living. In our retreats, we're doing walking meditations, so you can practice doing it with your eyes open.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to be relaxed in your heart and awake in your brain, and you can do it with your eyes closed, okay, let's take it out for a test drive.
Yeah.
Let me open my eyes. Let me pay a little bit more attention to my inner world. Let me practice feeling this feeling. Let me practice feeling this way, and let my brain do what it does. Let me get to finally change my physiology. Let me change my state. Let me walk as the healed person. Let me walk as the abundant person. Let me walk as if my prayers are answered. Let me walk in this state. If I keep practicing that over and over, it's going to become a habit, right?
Yeah.
So we hit it as many ways as we can. We have at least 7 or 8 different breaths that we do because we see how they all work in the brain. We have all kinds of meditations. We have sitting meditations. We have standing and walking meditations. We have laying down meditations, but we want you to be able to do it with your eyes open, with your eyes closed, standing, walking, any way you can, so that you don't default and return back to that person. Now, if you do default, you didn't fail. That's a program. You just went unconscious. And how many times do we have to forget until we stop forgetting and start remembering? That's the moment of change. No one cares how many times you fell off the bicycle. If you ride the bicycle now, you ride the bike. So it's the constant process every single day. And I think that sometimes we look for evidence in our life and it hasn't happened. And I think it's so important that we still show up.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's where you're changing the most. And when you get to that point where you could care less if it happens or not, because you feel so happy, so grateful for who you are, get ready, because your life is going to begin to change in magical ways. I'm so proud of our community, not because they do the work every day, not because they're trying to be good or please anybody. They do it because they don't want the magic to really end. The experiment is too good. They're going to continue to be a creator in their life. So then when they change the way they feel and the way they think, and they start seeing evidence in their life, they're going to remember what they did inside of them to produce that outcome, and they're going to believe they're creator of their life and less of the victim of their life, and that's empowerment. Yeah. And you can't take that away from anybody. You can't tell me now you're too sick to do that. You can't tell me you're too old to do that. You can't tell me you had a horrible past, you're too out of shape. You can't even tell me that you never meditated before, because we have people that come, they know nothing, they get dragged by somebody, and they have the most profound experience because they're not expecting anything. And we have data that suggests that when you don't expect anything, you're going to have a profound moment. So everybody can do it. There's nobody that's so special to be excluded from this process. And we have had people that have had brutal pasts with abuse, with trauma. We've seen Navy SEALs and prisoners with horrible, horrible memories literally transform in 7 days. And I could say right now that you make the time. every single day to decide who you're going to present to the world, and you get up as that person. You're going to fall a lot of times, but sooner or later, once you start to change, it's pretty hard to go back. So we do so many different types of breath for so many different types of reasons. The breath that we were talking about with Inspire, pulling the mind out of the body, we do that breath to take that creative life force that sits at the base of the spine, that energy that can create another life form. The energy we use to digest a meal, the energy that we use to run from a predator. We're taking all that energy that's stored in the body emotionally, and we're pulling that energy back up into the brain. If you practice this breath repeatedly, there will be a release of energy into the brain. We have the data to show that you're going to have a lot more energy in your brain. You're going to be way more coherent in your brain, and you're going to be more conscious, right? And so why is that important? Why? Because when you regulate your brain waves, we don't want you to fall asleep. We want you to actually be really relaxed and awake at the same time. So we do this one breath called pulling the mind out of the body. That's the Inspire series, where we're taking all that creative energy and we're with the breath, pulling that energy right up to a specific area of the brain. When you do that properly, your brain will go into an altered state. That's the reason why we do it. Then we do all kinds of other breathing, like breathing to change the heart rhythm. Sometimes when we're doing the laying down breath, when we're practicing getting into that mystical state, just when the audience is just starting to move into a slower brainwave state, we'll do a very forced inhalation, exhalation, over and over again, like a hiker's breath, only so that the person feels euphoric, and so euphoric that they don't want to fall asleep, and they'll move into a slower brainwave pattern, and the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind opens, and many times there's a mystical experience waiting for that person that's transcendental. So we do all kinds of different breathing techniques because we have different intentions behind each one of them. So you're looking at a very, very sophisticated machine, and if you run it for 30 minutes, you're going to see in time an equal number of ones or zeros or heads or tails, and you're going to see the straight line. And you get a group of people together with brain coherence and heart coherence. They're emitting a field, and when we do healings in our events, 100% of the time when we do those healings, those random event generators have dramatic skews to show that random events become less random and more intentional. And it's collective networks of observers that determine reality. And it's not the number of people, it's not the amount of energy, because it could be entropic. It's the most coherent energy, and causing a machine that's programmed to behave in a very, very different way. And I think that idea of community, of people coming together when everybody else is in fear to show courage, when everybody else is in pain to show compassion, when everybody else is in anger or hatred to show love. I mean, I think by nature as human beings, I think we are wired to give, to connect, to commune, to take care of one another, to heal one another, to shine for one another. And our data is so exciting to actually support that theorem. It's really hard to be in community when you're in survival, because survival makes us put our attention on ourselves, right? And I think that when people are not living in survival, when they're out of survival, our nature really is community, is culture, is connection. And it starts with the self, then it starts with our closest relationships, and it builds out from there. And I think that's a healthy model, for the world. I mean, when you're working on yourself and I'm working on myself, and I'm okay with me and you're okay with you, we're going to be okay with everybody, And I think when we're not okay with ourselves, that's when it gets complicated.